What's up, man?
Um, just setting in on the live, man. No, so my deconstruction happened, and the reason I say it happened accidentally is because I was actually preparing myself to, the correct word is argue with atheists. And as I was looking, I'm serious, man. And as I was looking at some of the points that these atheists were making, a lot of things like I guess showed itself to me, like things that Christians learned that aren't true. Um, just being taught the wrong thing, even from the Bible. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Atheists know the Bible. I mean, especially ones that used to be Christian, they know the Bible like that. If they ever converted back to being a Christian, they'd make great scholars and preachers because they've studied it way more than the actual Christians. Yeah.
It's actually funny. I have a religious discussion about religion almost daily with one of my religious friends,
Hmm.
and during our conversation, he actually told me, "Man, if you came back to the faith, you would be an amazing preacher."
Yeah. And actually, I have a better appreciation for some parts of the Bible now that I actually know what the Bible is. Like, I could preach some sermons and have it be in line with what I believe, because there are some positive teachings in the Bible. Once you sort of sift it all out and you understand like the context and how it was constructed and the history of it, then you can sort of separate the positive from the negative. But man, when you're steeped in it, everything is all positive, no matter what. It has to be positive. It's crazy.
Is distinguishing between what is literal and allegorical is a
Yeah,
huge part of understanding the Bible.
absolutely. And I mean, just like they don't teach they don't teach what the Bible is a collection of different literature genres. Like, yeah, it's divided up into like the law and then the prophets and like poetry, psalms and Job and stuff like that. But they don't actually teach like this is apocalyptic literature and it has its own um characteristics, its own ideology, its own purpose, its own. And then here's wisdom literature. It has its own characteristics. And then, here are all these, it's like they don't actually teach anything about how the Bible. It's crazy. Um,
I think as a work of
so,
literature
so are
is
you an atheist? You're an atheist now?
yes. Well, I classify myself as a non-theistic Satanist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Satanist in the sense that you are living for yourself.
exactly.
Gotcha. Right, right, right. Um, I am not an atheist. I did consider being an atheist, but there is a part of me that cannot deny some of the things that I've witnessed and experienced. And there, I'm willing to admit that believing in the creator or the source or the master code of the universe, whatever it actually is, the mystery of it all, that belief is kind of like a luxury I give myself because maybe my programming is so wired that I wouldn't be able to be an honest atheist. So I allow myself the luxury of belief, even though I can't prove any of it.
So, in all actuality, I guess you would consider me an agnostic atheist, just for the simple fact of I lean more towards atheism,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I don't discount the possibility of anything because no matter how small the chance, there is still that chance.
Yeah. Well, I was watching a video from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was saying like the amount of stuff we actually know, like how things work in the universe and even on our own world that we live in, is like less than 10% of our knowledge. Only we know how much we don't know, and it's in the 90% of how things work. Like we have no clue about gravity. Like they we can measure it, but then we don't have enough mass for it to actually work. There's like a bunch of different things that we just have no clue. And it's like if we actually think we have enough knowledge to actually make a decision of what's out there, what isn't out there, that's that's ignorant because we don't have a clue really of the true nature of reality and everything that encompasses it.
I
Or,
definitely agree with that statement just for the simple fact of, like you said, we don't know what we don't know. Um, I, I mean, I was on a live the other day and this guy was talking about the idea that matter can energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And then he was talking about scientists are now witnessing particles of energy enter our reality and then blink out again. So that, I
mm,
mean, he said that all kinds of theories are stemming off of it, whether that be a theory of, multiple dimensions and they're clashing in this one area, all
mhm,
kinds of things that opened up just from witnessing that one thing.
mhm. Yeah, we can observe things but have no idea what it is or how it works. And like there are things that have been documented and observed, like stories, little tiny children with accurate depictions of previous lives. And there's not a scientific explanation for that, but the observation is still exists and it's documented. We don't have an understanding of it. I mean, it could be a past life, or it could be something totally else. It could be an alternate reality bleeding into this reality. It could be many things. We just don't know.
Well, I mean,
Oh.
in that, I do believe that there is something after death. I'm not sure what it is, just for the simple fact of, what is our consciousness and what happens to it when we die?
Hmm.
Or, sorry, unalive, excuse me.
I don't care. I think that whole. I mean, is TikTok really going to delete accounts? Because I mean, it's not. I don't know. People. I guess if I was a big creator and had like a revenue to protect, I guess I'd be more careful. I don't know. Most of my followers aren't even aware that I exist because in order in order to do lives, I just went on to like follow back parties or whatever, and nobody from there, has any idea about my stuff.
Yeah.
I think I actually only have a couple hundred followers that chose to follow me because of what I talk about.
I think
I,
that what you're talking about though is why a lot of people do turn to a God. Um, because the mind wants to understand what it doesn't know.
mm-hmm.
And it's a real big thing, the God of the gaps. Well, of course God can explain it because it's a God.
Mm-hmm. Um, what is the flavor of religion of your friend? I'm Christian, but there's lots of different types of Christian.
So he is non-denominational Christian, yes.
Okay. That was the last kind of group I hung around before I did my full exit. And it's interesting. Um, I always thought that non-denominational Christian was kind of like um, an uncommitted or lazy Christian because they couldn't pick a side. But I found that I learned a lot when I was hanging around them because they have also done a lot of study because they probably have come from a denomination and then outgrew it and did some study. And I learned quite a lot when I was hanging around those guys, at least my group.
Yeah, I mean, he's just getting into religion. I think he's only been saved for 3 months now.
Oh, yeah, what was he before?
I believe he was agnostic.
Man. And you guys have conversations on a daily and he's still going for it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, so really, I'm not having these conversations with him to, change his mind about anything. It's more of like I want him to really understand some of the things the Bible is saying and not
Hmm.
be misled by what people have been taught since, the conception of Christianity.
Yeah, what's the difference between with the text and tradition?
Well, even in the text, there are some things that a lot of Christians don't really understand, in my opinion.
Well,
So, like,
because of tradition, mostly because of the dogma that whatever umbrella they find themselves under, that's their lens, and they're unable to see outside of that box, I guess.
oh yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that I like about him is we can have these conversations and not try to sway each other either way. It's just
Hmm.
good intellectual conversation. And it's even better because it's one of those things that you're not supposed to talk about. Like it's stigmatized to speak about religion around other people.
Hmm. Well, you have a real privilege to have a friend like that. I I thought I had some friends that we would always be able to share because when we met, we met sort of in that journey of questioning and trying to find our path, and we would talk about everything. They were from a Mormon background. I was from a Seventh Day Adventist background, and we lost contact for a couple years. And I was so excited to talk with them again. And turns out that they converted to Calvinism, and we have not been able to have a decent conversation since. They always think I'm trying to convert them, and it always feels like they're condemning and trying to convert me. I'm like, dude, this is not cool, man. Like what happened? It's not fun anymore.
It, I don't know. It to me, and that's the reason that I agree with the statement. Like, not only did my life improve, but I improved as a person. I'm not looking at people now going, "Oh, I'm condemning you to hell because of something you're doing," or even based off of looks. Because a lot of people who are in religions will look at somebody, with tattoos on their face or things like that, and just immediately condemn.
Oh yeah, the tattoo thing was huge growing up. Long hair was huge. Piercings were huge. And the one thing I didn't even realize I was until I really left, I had no idea I was homophobic. In a Christian, from a Christian perspective, having thoughts of condemnation against people who are gay, that's a loving thing to do.
Hmm.
You don't understand that it's not loving at all. You're trained to be in a condemnation mindset. I did not appreciate that when I really realized how deep it went inside of me. And being free of all of it is amazing.
Well,
Just to,
I think another big thing is I no longer live with the stress of worrying about, oh, well, is this pleasing to God or is this pleasing to God? It's more of as long as I'm not hurting someone, it is pleasing to me.
hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you so the faith, oh, yeah, it's faith, the system that I follow, one of the statements is everyone has to live according to their highest light. And you can't judge somebody else for traveling their path for living according to their highest light. It's not your place. They're the only ones that can judge themselves.
I think there's actually a teaching in Hinduism, and it's called the Gupta, and it's basically the Gupta translate to your path.
Hmm.
And it's really just, no matter what you choose, as long as you choose the path that you want to be on, then it's okay.
Yeah, because every path has lessons basically customized for you and your experience. And if if you don't live a genuine life, some of those lessons maybe will take a lot longer for you to run across.
I remember shortly before I left religion, I was having a conversation with my pastor, and I
Mm-hmm.
asked him, why did God create people knowing they would become an atheist? And he said, you know the difference between an atheist and a believer? He said every atheist that does a kind act is actually doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're not doing it to please God. They're doing it because they actually want to help someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no reward in it for them, no afterlife. Yeah, I studied atheism. I mean, I didn't study it, but I exposed myself to a lot of debates and just atheists who are just pining on about life, and their perspective. And I was blown away. I was lied to as a Christian because the atheist perspective is one of it. It's more miraculous that we're alive on this planet if there is no creator. It's way more wonderful and miraculous if all of this happened sort of according to the laws of nature without divine intervention. What makes every day more meaningful, the fact that we have the privilege to be alive at all and experience this life. I didn't understand the gravity of how unique just being alive is until I started listening to atheists. I'm like, holy cows, that makes life even more precious than the way I was taught.
Do you know how many times I've tried to explain that perspective to a Christian and they do not understand?
No, they
And
won't get it. They won't get it because they're programmed not to get it.
it's crazy to me because, like, and I tell them, I'm like, what is more miraculous? The fact that we were just created to follow this God, or the fact that the billionth of a chance for us to exist and it actually happened?
Hmm.
But of course, they don't understand because I think that if they feel that if they did understand and actually, like, took that into themselves, it would be displeasing to God.
Oh yeah, there are some things that they are not, and they don't realize that they're not allowed to even ask certain questions. It's just sort of in the background, the static of the program. They're not allowed to ask questions about certain things because if they actually got curious about certain questions, it would destroy the program. It would just delete it. I mean, there's one thing. When my wife and I realized that there was actually more than one God in the Old Testament, like real, like not just a wooden stone image, but it's describing real gods interacting, and the God of Israel is losing sometimes, and there's there's interaction. Once I understood that, I realized that Christians didn't have a clue about what was happening in the Old Testament. That was one of the cracks that just opened my mind wide open, and I just got really curious about a lot of other things.
Well, to me, one of the biggest verses that kind of proves that is and one of the arguments, or not really arguments, but points that I make to Christians about their understanding of the Bible is, um so Adam and Eve did not get kicked out of the garden for disobedience. They got kicked out because they became like gods. And when you're reading, I believe it's Genesis 5:3, it says, behold, for man has become like us, knowing
Mm.
good and evil.
Yep. Yep. And got to get them out of there before they get the other tree. Got to get them isolated. I really think there's a lot of truth to blending the Genesis story and the Sumerian ancient texts. The Garden of Eden was a genetic kind of experiment, and Adam and Eve woke up and they had to get kicked out because that curiosity and that knowledge would spread to the rest of the experiments, and you got to isolate the rest of them from the ones with the knowledge.
I recently watched a guy, uh, one of his TikToks, and he was basically explaining. I wish I could remember it verbatim, but basically, it was the creation story after Ragnarok in Norse paganism. Um, and what he
Hmm.
was saying made a lot of sense because the things that were being said, like some of the names. So the Norse pagan gods, if I'm not mistaken, get their immortality from a tree of life in the Garden of Eden.
Oh yeah, and the room. Okay, was it Odin? Was the one that gifted humanity with runes, and there was a part of that story was a tree as well. I think.
Yes. So he hung himself from a tree
Yeah.
for I can't remember how many days, but in that he discovered the runes and then gave those to mankind to have the knowledge of gods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. All of these, and it's not isolated to geography. All of these pantheons and myths. I mean, in every continent, there's like these principles or threads of truth, names, or just the narratives with different labels. There's a thread of truth that runs through all of these different things. Like, where did that come from? I mean, did everybody just make up the same thing in their own language at the same time, independent of each other? Something's being hidden from us. Something's happening.
I mean, I always tell people that for the most part, a religious belief is a subjective truth.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is subjective, and the truth. There, I mean, I don't think anything in this world is 100% true or 100% false because you can't come up with anything without some kind of blend. I don't think it's like a coin, two sides on it. I think yeah, all the myths and religions and everything has got to have a little bit of both in it.
I think a lot of that happened the way it happened with Christianity because as Christianity was, coming into the world, they were meeting different groups of people and incorporating their creation stories or this story from this religion or this story from this religion. And I believe that that's been going on since the beginning of time, since man first conceptualized what a god is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like so in the tradition that I follow, it has a history, a narrative history. Um Basically, if you take all of these different cultures and religions and uh narratives and you just keep reversing history backwards and backwards, everything gets closer and closer together until you wind up with basically just the human experience and sort of a baseline knowledge, baseline belief system, baseline interaction with the world. And it wasn't a religion; it was just how things were. And then you forward time again, and you go from that starting point out, and people spread out. Geography shapes how religions form. Desert people have a different idea about the divine than people who live in dense forests, and things change, and customs and cultures all develop, and language has a huge part to play, and that's why we have so many different ideas about the supernatural and religion, but they're all very very similar at the same time.
So I think when it comes to the supernatural, again, I don't discount the existence of anything, especially having had my own experience.
Mhm.
Um, but in that, I think that a lot of things are things that people have witnessed, but because, as you said, language, it's called something different.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And one thing I've noticed in the last 2 or 3 years of being free from religion and just sort of exploring myself and my belief systems and my experiences, when I hyper focus on something, maybe I'll get swept away in an idea and get really passionate, excited about it. All of a sudden, I'm having experiences about it. And then maybe I'll get distracted with something and the experiences die out. My mind is sort of helping fill in, like, I don't know, creating the experience of the belief,
Um,
and I'm aware of it, but it's
there's
interesting to observe.
they did a study, um, and there's actually a theory right now that humans are in the infancy of like, um, just because the way the mirror neurons in our brain are designed to pick up like subconsciously you could make a micro facial expression. My conscious mind may not pick up on that, but my subconscious mind will.
Hmm.
Um, they actually did a study, and they put a bunch of people in a room, and this screen generated random numbers, and they told people, okay, I want you to focus on any number you want. And it come to find out that the number they focused on came up more times than usual than it really should have.
Hmm. I've heard about similar studies. I'm not sure if that particular one, but yeah, it's like a study that shows some level of either precognition or your subconscious just being hyper aware before your conscious mind is. Yeah,
um
that's
there's I recently watched a YouTube video, and the guy was explaining, like, it really helped me get a grasp on how like vast infinite really is. He was talking about how there are more numbers between 0 and 1 than there are numbers that we can count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
it's an infinite number between 0 and 1. That's
Yes,
crazy to think
it's
about.
it's crazy to think about. And he was talking about, so basically this guy came up with a concept for I believe he called it the hyper dictionary or the hyper Webster or something like that. And
Okay.
basically, you start off with AA or A, and then you go AA, and then AAA, and you just keep going and going and going. And he said eventually we would have, basically the way he put it is like we would have the exact story as to what happened to Amelia Earhart, but we would also have every story of what didn't happen to her.
Um, creating creating parallel narratives on paper, every single possibility imaginable.
It was ridiculous to think about.
Yeah. Well, so that's a real thing,
So I
or is
don't.
that a theory?
I think it's definitely a theory because I believe he started to conceptualize it and actually make it, but again, it would take more time than we have in order to build this dictionary.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that he would just write a sophisticated program, but still, it would take a tremendous amount of space and processing power to. I mean, it would be an infinite thing. It would never end, right? I mean,
Yeah,
technically, it couldn't actually be complete.
yeah, it would go until literally the end of existence.
Well, it's definitely not complete now, then, because well, here, that's an interesting idea, though. Hmm. Well, thank you for stopping by. So I haven't been on TikTok Live in like a year because my old phone, for whatever reason, would always freeze up on me, and it got so frustrating that I just stopped. and I just got a new phone yesterday, so I'm getting back in the saddle, so to speak. And you're the first guest I've had, and this is what I like to do. I don't really like interacting with comments. I mean, I will, but I like having guests come on, so I really appreciate you coming on. Um, this is the first time I used this backdrop. I just thought maybe it would be generic enough where people would want to interact. So I'm glad that you came up.
Of course, I've actually, I always enjoy intellectual conversation, and even if we don't agree on some things, it's always good to get other perspectives.
Definitely, definitely. I really think that when we can get our humanity in order and get off of our lazy butts and just start being curious about each other and connecting, because we're all part of the same family, the whole race idea is a construct. We're all brothers and sisters of humanity. When we can actually remember that and get along like a functioning family, things will get a lot better. And having simple conversations like this is a great way to start.
I mean, at the end of the day, we all, I don't know, I always view things as like we always want to understand what we don't know, as I was saying earlier.
Mhm.
We shouldn't be afraid to talk to someone about some things that are stigmatized, or really voice how we feel about something, even if that means that other people might not like us at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's interesting. Okay, so um, creating a belief to fill in for what we don't know, but most people don't realize that they're doing that. If if we could include, like, as we're growing up, taught that beliefs are that, sort of like a bookmark of, like, it's a bookmark. This space where this bookmark is, we're allowed to have a belief there because we don't have, like, we don't have anything to put there. But just because right now, when people have a belief, they actually believe it. Like they've drunk the juice. If we can have a belief, knowing it's just a bookmark, a placeholder, and we're waiting for something better to come along, then belief can stop being so demonized. Because it serves a function. We have to put something in the blank space, and if we realize that it's a blank space and we're just having a belief because it's a blank space, then belief becomes a functioning part of a healthy, part of society instead of a demonized part of society.
Well, I completely agree with what you're saying, because as times change, so do beliefs. It was once believed that and I hate to bring up the subject of race, but a white man and a black woman could not be together.
Right.
It was frowned upon, and now, unfortunately, it's going back to being frowned upon. But it really is a belief, a placeholder, and you should be willing to let go of it, because beliefs change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, everything cycles, and every time a cycle comes around, there's new lessons that are gained and sort of put into the baseline of, sort of, it's like we cycle, we go down, and when we go back up, we learn things that become part of the new floor, and then we cycle again, and we never, I mean, hopefully, we never go all the way back down. It's just a slowly incremental up. So every time we cycle backwards, hopefully we are cycling back to a higher low than the previous low. That's the only way I can remain hopeful for the future when I see these cycles repeating, like you just mentioned.
I mean, the real thing about it is it takes the people who, like us, are willing to let go of our beliefs of the time in order to improve for the next set of beliefs, to make that cycle and actually, express that we've learned something from this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, everybody, people. I mean, I know people who are where we are, but it's it's like they don't have any motivation or ambition to force their beliefs or lack of beliefs or knowledge onto other people, because they have come from that environment and they don't want anything to do with it. Well, I respect that. That's fine. But we do have to put ourselves out there to some extent merely for the sake of exposure. Persuasion, I'm over persuasion. That's nonsense. But just exposure for other people to bump into, on their own, it's a necessary part. Even if you don't, want to, it's like doing your part for the next generation.
As crazy as it may seem to say, one of the best places that I've seen that willingness to expose is being in the military. Um,
Explain. I don't know anything about the military except what I've seen on movies.
so being in the military, like I've seen people come in as full-blown racists
Hmm.
and to the point where like first time meeting a person of color is
Hmm.
in the military. And by the time they leave, they've been like the exposure to this new thing. It's the same
Hmm.
with, people who are willing to have religious discussions or philosophical discussions and put out, their view of politics at the time.
Is that is that just because of exposure, or is the military a unique environment where, I don't know, I'm drawing from not personal experience, but the idea of stripping the individual down to create a unit, is that part of the process, or is it just exposure, or is it both?
I believe it's both, just for the simple fact of, you know, we are stripped down and made as one unit, but at the
Hmm.
same time, we still maintain our views of the world and
Hmm.
philosophy and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a unique environment to where one person can be an atheist and a Christian and all these things intermingle and people get curious because it's the one time that they've been able to have a conversation with somebody without thinking, oh, well, I'm going to offend this person or this person's going to offend me. We have a
Right.
mutual respect for each other so that way we are able to have these conversations.
Yeah, and it in that environment, do you get good at compartmentalizing? Like you are allowed to have intellectual disagreements and everything, but um, that's in your bunk. But when you're in the field, you're operating in one mind. You have each other's backs or whatever.
um so we recently had an incident where my religious buddy got asked the question by someone in the unit who's bisexual.
Hmm.
Does he think that he's going to hell? Unfortunately, he does believe that. But it's that.
Oh,
But then again, I also am under the impression that you know if you're going to ask a question, be willing to not accept the answer, but agree to disagree with that answer.
hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the only way to have civil discourse is to be able to, hear each other out. And there's an idea being this was taught to me while I was a Christian, of being honorable to, conflict is one of the catalysts to creating intimate relationships, like really deep relationships. Um, but both sides have to be honorable to the conflict. And basically, what that means is what we're describing is creating space for the other person to express themselves, letting go of the need to be right. And the idea is just to have a better understanding of the other person. And they're doing that for you, and you're doing it for them. And nobody has to be right, nobody has to be wrong. It's just creating space to be heard.
I definitely agree with that. I've had more. Christians willing to learn about what I believe just for the simple fact of, it's the first time they've had the opportunity to possibly interact with someone like me.
Mm.
And it's the one time that they're like, this is a conversation I can have with this person because I'm genuinely curious.
Hmm. Well, that curiosity is a rare quality that I have been searching for and found it very little amongst the Christians I've encountered. It's hard to find that. So I'm glad that you are finding it because I'm still looking.
I'm honestly it I think the fact that so we have a saying in the military, we're all trauma bonded together. We've all been through some like, we go to a field event and it starts raining on us for the next 12 hours and we've got to sit in the rain out in the elements and stuff like that. So that kind of stuff does bring you together and
Hmm.
it makes you more open to hearing someone out because, oh well we've been through this together.
Oh, so you're referring to the people that you've that in your unit. They're actually curious. I can see that because of that bond.
I mean, so as create like um I find that like even the chaplain, um, the basically the spiritual leader,
Hmm.
um, I've noticed that a lot of chaplains are versed in a lot of different religions, despite them being Muslim, Christian, whatever. They are versed in a lot of religions because they have to deal with those people. They have to
Yep.
deal with Norse pagans. They have to deal with Hindus. They have to deal with people of every faith that comes to them. And
Yeah.
I think it gives them a greater respect for understanding why and how that person can believe what they believe.
My brother, when he is a chaplain, he doesn't work in the military, but he works for hospitals. And he had a master's in divinity already for a pastor. He had to go back to school for 4 years on top of that just to become a chaplain, and that was what he studied. And I think that's one reason why he stopped being a pastor was because his eyes were opened up to the reality of other people's faiths as well. He's still part of the church, but I think his worldview opened up dramatically, and he enjoys being a chaplain because he doesn't have to be dogmatically loyal to one thing. He can just he can kind of go with the flow with whoever he's talking with and just connect as human beings instead of having that church filter on all the time.
I like to call people like that religious chameleons because, well, really, because they can talk to someone about Norse paganism and
Hmm.
actually keep up with the conversation and have a real respect for that person believing in that.
Hmm.
And they can do that with any religion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty valuable. I was really surprised when he told me it would take him 4 years to full time for 4 years, not part time. And and he told me what he was learning, and I'm like, oh my goodness, wow. Most Christians are not going to willingly expose themselves to that, so I really appreciated his effort to accomplish that. So,
I,
because
I
it's super valuable.
I agree. I think that a lot of that the people who aren't willing to expose themselves to that, I feel, and I say I feel because, it's not a factual statement, but I feel it's because they're truly shaky in their faith and
Oh yeah,
they
they're
don't
afraid to
want,
learn it.
yeah, they
Oh,
don't want this other outside view to start influencing them into another way because they're so set in what they believe.
oh yeah. I have people I've been very conservative in what I have spoken to them about, and even anything off of the script. These are people I grew up with, so I'm familiar. We all we're programmed with the same script, and any variation of that, it's like they have to disengage, and the reason why is because they cannot afford any amount of doubt. And
Mm-hmm.
so anything that causes doubt has to be disengaged with. That is some weak ass faith. I mean, seriously,
What's
like
funny?
that does not hold up to scrutiny because you're avoiding scrutiny. But whatever.
What's funny to me is like, you know, having come from Christianity, I was, once a youth minister. I was heavily drinking the Kool-Aid.
Hmm.
Um, and I tell people that, and they were like, "Oh, well, you left. You were never a Christian to begin with."
Yeah, I've heard that.
And I'm like, I mean, who are you to say that? My worldview changed, things that of my understanding changed, and I don't. If something doesn't stick with me, then I let it go.
Well, you know what? Might be able to relate to this as well. Now that you've left, it almost feels like you're more of a Christian than when you were actually a Christian because because you know why.
I definitely relate with that because you know. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but did you ever see the interview Jelly Roll did where he was talking about like what the church has become and who Jesus actually was biblically?
I haven't heard that interview, but I've heard probably similar ones. And go ahead and tell me about that interview.
So he was saying that the people that Jesus was hanging out with, the man was protecting whores and prostitutes and the scum of the earth.
Hmm.
And he says, and now, of course, his wife used to be a prostitute and he was her pimp. And he says, and now like Christian women will look at my wife and they're the first people to condemn her. He said,
Hmm.
Jesus was basically a biker. He said if he was around today, he'd be riding a Harley.
Yep. Or riding a train like a hobo in the 20s and 30s,
Yeah.
tramp or something.
And that I can definitely agree with what you're saying because now, I mean, there was one night I was at the bar and I had to walk to the convenience store to get cigarettes. And there was a guy standing outside and no shirt on. I'm not going to make any assumptions about, whether he was on something or anything like that, but definitely someone a Christian would not engage with.
Hmm.
And he approached me. He was like, "Hey man, you mind if I get one of those cigarettes off of you?" I was like, "Dude, you can take half this pack, man. You're good." So I gave him half the pack. Um, and before I walked off, I gave him a hug, like
Mm.
he's
Yeah.
human.
Yeah. You made a connection with another human being and you made him feel like he wasn't invisible.
Exactly.
Yep. Yep. That's the magic right there is when we can actually just connect with each other without any dogma involved.
Yeah, and like shortly after that, I thought back on that moment, and I was like, man, as a Christian, I never would have engaged with that guy. Like I would have, I probably would have just snubbed him, like just being
Hmm.
a righteous, more righteous than thou.
Well, I don't want to diss on Christianity too much, but there are some truths that I feel like are apparent. The the love that Christians espouse comes with conditions, and you have to provide some kind of value to them in order for them to love you. Either you have to be on your way to becoming a Christian, like you're a prospect, you're a viable prospect, you know? Once they realize that you're not a viable prospect, they're done. They don't have a value. You've lost all your value to them. And the other is other Christians. especially Christians that share the same flavor of Christianity. You can share life, you can go to each other's houses, you can, be involved. And I know this from personal experience that when you stop being that to them, they lose any desire to be connected to you
Hmm.
because there's no reason to be connected to you. You walked away. And I was like, I'm still a person who was your friend, but that doesn't mean anything anymore.
I've 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 definitely been lucky in my life. I've had a friend since eighth grade, and he knew me back when I was a Christian.
Mhm.
Um, and after I left the faith, I was, terrified because he still believes in God, and I was terrified to tell him, "Hey, man, I'm an atheist now." And when I told him, he was like, "I don't understand why you're telling me this. Like, you're still my fucking brother."
that's awesome. Hang
And
on to that guy.
oh yeah, and then shortly after that, when I um, got into, I guess I'll call it a religion because it is a form of belief in something like morals and stuff. But after I told him, "Hey man, I'm a Satanist," he was like, "Dude, I don't give a fuck."
That's awesome. That's hard to find. I have a friend who was a mentor when I was a Christian living in Montana, and I am committed to telling him, catching him up on my life journey if I ever see him again in person. But I am afraid that he probably will. I have no idea. I don't want to have an expectation, but I'm hoping I will find a brother that still remains at the end of the conversation.
Yeah,
That's my
I,
hope.
it's hard to find, man. I was really shocked. Like even his mom, who is like can't even have the number 666 on a receipt of hers,
Oh man.
is very accepting of my beliefs.
Well, that's awesome. I think people are afraid to even be curious because if they actually were curious and had an honest conversation with a Satanist, they would their fear would dissipate. You know. Well, I mean, most Satanists. Well, I haven't studied Satanism and all the different sects. I know that there are Satanists that are more um, magically inclined, but most Satanists are, like what you are, is um, living, making the ride that we're on satisfying for yourself, and
Hmm.
that's your motivation. You know, most Satanists aren't sacrificing kids in the forest.
And that's the thing. I think because of the satanic panic of the 80s when they did have the cults that were doing that
Hmm.
is the reason that we're getting such a tough go of it now.
Hmm.
Recently, so I'm a member of the Satanic Temple. A lot of people, the magically inclined Satanists, who follow Anton LaVey, they look at us as not true Satanists because we do get into politics. We do get into things that they say Satanists shouldn't get into. Um, Recently, we had a cr- a a Christmas display put up at the Iowa government building.
Oh, is that the one that got beheaded?
Yes, that is the one that
Oh,
got
I saw that
beheaded.
on TikTok. Like, oh my goodness, Christians making themselves look bad again.
I remember I've actually been kind of on a petty crusade here lately, and I know it's terrible to say, but I've actually been going into Christian lives and asking the Christians, who will condemn this man? Who will condemn him for doing this? And I haven't gotten a single, yeah, he was wrong for doing that. I've been getting more of, oh, what a warrior for God and things like that. And I'm like, but let me go tear down a nativity scene or knock down a cross that's on a government building and all hell breaks loose, literally.
Yep. Yep, Christianity, well, religion in general, organized religion in general. I'll just make sure I say organized,
Mm-hmm.
has been placed on this earth for a purpose, and it is not a good one. It is, it has been meticulously organized and placed through the centuries, and we are seeing the results. Division, hate, discrimination, and nobody, I mean, that's the one of the main reasons why there is so much division in this world is because of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's not an accident. Okay, I'm gonna I have to go to work later tonight. I'm gonna end on this. On Facebook, one of my friends, friend of the family I grew up with, she's an Adventist. She reposted a picture of it was a picture of like martyrs, at the Colosseum, and she was
Mm-hmm.
saying that let's never forget that Christians, used to get burned at the stake and ripped apart just for simply reading the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
My response was, Christians were the ones doing that to the Christians. You know that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Along with every other group that they've ever encountered, that's the mode that's their mode. Um, and this other guy responded. We had a long thread, and one of the things he said was, any religion that feels themselves superior enough to enforce it with war and violence is part of the Babylon system. And I said, you just described Christianity, bro. You
Yep.
don't even hear the words coming out of your mouth. Dude, you just described Christianity. And then he came back with, well, that wasn't really Christianity. Those were deceived. Like, whatever. It's the fruit of the spirit. It's the fruit of the religion. It's all. I used to say all organized religion except for Buddhist, but I've heard some sketchy things about some monk culture, how they treat women and stuff. So I
Mhm.
can't even include Buddhism in that anymore. But you can find really good, positive, very wise teachings in all religion. It's just the practice of the religion is where it goes astray.
I I think that's the reason that I'm part of what I'm part of is because of the simple fact of like, I've met people who are anti any vaccine. I've met people who I've met trans people, and I'll obviously respect them as a person, and had conversations with them, and a lot of them that I've met have said that would it be nice if people would validate the fact that I feel like I'm a man trapped in a woman's body or vice versa. Absolutely. And then they go on to say, well, but they don't owe me that validation.
Hmm.
So it's really cool to see the people that I've interacted with, how even though they feel one way, they still respect everybody else on a certain level.
Right. Yeah. That is, if everybody did that, that would be great. Everybody sort of stay in their own lane. Wave at each other, give each other hugs, but basically just stay in your own lane.
Yeah.
So,
All
all
right,
right,
Dave.
brother. What was your name? Cody? No, that's not your name.
You actually just got my name.
Cody? Oh, okay. I misspelled cuddle and I said Cody.
Oh wow, that's great. Are you
Or
sure
miss.
you're not?
I hope I'm not, because I just had a crazy dream today that I hope does not come true. So I don't. Well, it was great talking to you, man.
You as
And
well, David. Thank you.
anytime you see me on live, feel free to say hi or whatever. Hopefully, I could be doing this a little bit more often. But it's good conversation.
I appreciate it. Same to you, man. If I'm scrolling through TikTok and I see you on, I'll definitely join in and add to the conversation, I guess.
Hey, next time we're on, remind me. I will share a little bit more about what I believe and the structure of it and the history of it. Um, it would, I would be curious. I think you would appreciate it because of the balanced approach to it. Anyway, I didn't really feel like getting into it tonight. I just wanted to have a conversation with you, but I think you would find it interesting, anyways.
I mean, I'm always willing to learn about something new, so absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly just like I said, exposure to new things is always good. So, all right, brother, I will talk to you later. I'm going to end the live and get ready to go to work.
All right, David, have a good one. Good night, man.
You too. Talk to you later. All right, bye.